I'm Devin Windelspect. I am the iGenet Editorial and Community Manager here at the International Center for Journalists. Welcome to the iGenet Pamela Howard Forum on Global Crisis Reporting. We're really excited to have you. This is our second now forum event just under iGenet. As you guys have seen, that we've kind of made the shift from the forum being its own independent thing into an iGenet thing. So we're still working out the kinks. We're still trying to figure out how to make this work best for you guys. Please, on the Facebook group in the comments or through the survey at the end of this, please let us know how we're doing, things we can improve on, anything like that. We're really happy to have all of you here, and we're excited to talk about Exiled media in the glowing authoritarian age. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to do my little spiel on what we're doing today, and I'm going to introduce our two speakers today. So we will begin. So press freedom is under threat globally. Today, authoritarian regimes are shuttering independent media outlets while harassing, imprisoning, and even killing journalists around the world. In just the last few years, independent media has all but disappeared in places like Afghanistan, Hong Kong, and Russia, while journalists in countries such as Georgia, India, Turkey, and many more are under heightened pressure from their critical reporting, which is forcing many of them to look to flee abroad. As risks to safety grow, reporters have found themselves forced to flee, but many haven't stopped reporting. Instead, they have created a wave of exiled or hybrid media outlets to bring fact-based information to their audiences, both in country and in the diaspora, and break through the noise of disinformation and propaganda that is disseminated by authoritarian regimes. So, in partnership with the Network of Exiled Media Outlets, or NEMO, who is here with us today, we at iGenet created a comprehensive toolkit to guide exiled journalists through the process of launching or moving a media outlet abroad. Our resources include advice for ensuring safety and security, tips for maintaining financial sustainability, methods for reaching audiences, and much more, all written by experienced exiled journalists reporting on Azerbaijan, Iran, Myanmar, Nicaragua, and Russia. Today, we're speaking with Cynthia Membreno, NEMO's coordinator and the former audience loyalty manager for Nicaragua's Confidencial. We're also speaking with Matt Casper, co-director and publisher of Azerbaijan's Maidan TV, as we walk you through the toolkit and share their experiences working in exile media. So we're going to begin, let Cynthia and Matt introduce themselves, and we're actually going to walk you through the toolkit today. So I'll be doing a little bit of screen sharing, and then we're going to move towards asking some questions to Cynthia and Matt. So everyone, welcome again. Looks like we got a pretty decent group here. And remember to please put your questions into the Q&A, and we will be asking those at the very end. So Matt, let's start with you. If you could just introduce yourself, introduce your work and your work with Maidan.
Sure. Hi. Thank you for having me. As you said, my name is Matt Casper. I am the publisher at Maidan TV. I've been working with Maidan TV now for 5.5 years. And Maidan TV is an Azerbaijani media outlet that was founded over 11 years ago in Berlin, Germany, by Azerbaijani dissidents who were trying to create a space for public debate as they saw it shrinking in country, in person, due to crackdowns and tightened restrictions on free speech. And since then, we have grown to become the largest independent or not digital outlet in Azerbaijan. And our main focus is on the daily news, but we also cover investigations, we cover cultural topics as well, but our main focus is society, politics, and economics. We have a large video content that we work on, and my main work is on the administrative side. So I'm coming not from the editorial perspective, but from the administrative side of running the outlet. I'm also one of the representatives in NEMO, which Cynthia will speak a little bit more about, and which is how we are a part of this, as Maidan TV is one of the founding members of NEMO.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Cynthia Membreno. I am Nicaraguan. I am in exile. I'm the coordinator of NEMO, and this means that I oversee that the mission and vision of the network is fulfilled by the members. And I also lead initiatives for advocacy and for knowledge exchange initiatives and many other activities that we have in the network. The network was created spontaneously by 5 members who wanted to have a space to share knowledge and also share experiences and tips on how to be more resilient while being in exile or being completely in exile or being hybrid organizations. So the idea was to create that space, and almost 2 years later, here we are creating this toolkit for other exile media outlets that might be interested. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, to give a little bit of a peek behind the screen, I met Matt and Cynthia at the International Journalism Festival in Perugia, where they were doing I think it was called Exile Media is Not a Trend, was the name of their panel.
Yeah.
And we at IGNet were trying to do more work with exile journalists, and we stumbled into some of the best experts in the business there. So we want to actually tell you what happened after that. We're going to go through our toolkit. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to go through a little bit of why we did it, what resources are available for exile journalists, and we're also going to have Matt and Cynthia go a little bit more in depth into the resources that they authored. So I'm going to start. I'm going to do a shared screen in 2 seconds, and here it is. So perfect. I believe I'm sharing my screen right now.
Yes,
That's amazing. So here's our Exile Media Toolkit. So if you haven't been on our toolkit section on IJNet, our toolkits are one-stop resources for journalists, written by journalists to be able to speak to the major, how to cover some major themes around the world today. We have elections reporting. We have a recent one on how to report on religion, actually, specifically in South Asia. But the Exile Media Toolkit is written by Nemo journalists, every one of these resources. So what we were trying to do with this, and I think Matt and Cynthia can speak a little bit more to this as well, is you're a journalist, you're thinking about, you have recently moved into exile, or you're thinking about moving into exile because of pressures on you from your home country. What are the things you need to start thinking about first? What are the things you need to be having in your head? You don't know where to start, and you need to put the things together to be able to create your own exile media outlet. So that's what we were trying to do here. Some of the things we kind of worked on, and we kind of sat together, Nemo and IGNet, we sat together and said, what do journalists need to know right out the gate? And we came up with about 8 resources for what they need to know. So I'm going to kind of go into it, and Matt's going to be able to speak to this a little bit better with just the Exile Media 101 resource. But we realized that fundraising and building reader revenue models was a huge one. How do you stay financially sustainable? How do you stay relevant to readers in exile? How do you manage to keep your audience in your home country and also in the diaspora? How do you manage to engage with them? How do you create a network of journalists in exile? How can you create journalists, especially journalists who are in your home country who might be working under a lot of pressure and a lot of their safety? How do you work with them safely and securely? How do you measure journalism's impact from exile, especially how do you measure impact in an authoritarian regime? And a big one that we talk to a lot of journalists about is how do you keep your mental health stable, and how do you as a team prioritize mental health while in exile? So all these kind of resources are here. We also, here at IJNet, we decided to talk to 3 different exile media outlets based around the world. When we try to get some from different continents because we wanted to show you guys how exile media operates in different capacities. So one of them, we talked to DVB, which is actually a part of Nemo, one of their outlets, about how they are working, this is the Democratic Voice of Burma, and how they were reporting on Myanmar/Burma during the ongoing civil war and its recent regression back into authoritarianism after a brief stint of democracy. We also are talking about Diva Gentes. It's another outlet that was based in Nicaragua and now is mostly based in Costa Rica. With exceptions, they're based around the world. We want to talk to them about their experiences of reporting in more of an American's perspective. And finally, we have Rome, which is a Russian, mostly video outlet, reporting on everyday Russians during, again, increasing authoritarianism, especially following the invasion of Ukraine. And so each of these, especially with the case studies, which I'll just kind of click into real quick. Of course, I selected my own, but are what we really wanted to do with these is we wanted to give a little bit of the story of these outlets, but also really talk to the challenges that they face in their reporting. So security in exile, what is that like? How are they personally managing psychological health, and how are they personally doing financial sustainability? These are the kind of things that we want to give examples of how people are doing instead of just the resources themselves, but the resources are incredibly valuable. So Matt, I'm going to start with you. We're going to pull up this Exile Media 101 resource, and I'm going to scroll through it. And I want you to just kind of go through what you were thinking with this, why we needed an Exile Media 101 toolkit, and go from there.
Yeah, so for the reason I chose to take on this this article, is because as I work on the administrative side of things, I'm kind of working in a lot of different fields within the organization, and you know, exiled media in general, independent media is not always the best funded, and those of us in exile, you know, we have to find ways to, you know, make up for staff shortages and funding shortages. And so that means finding tricks and tips here and there to solve all these different issues in different areas. So I thought, okay, what would I have wished that either I had known when I had started, or maybe I had wished the people who started our organization had known, since it was started, you know, very spontaneously, and with, you know, people did not have a ton of administrative experience, especially in running an NGO in Germany. So I wanted to, you know, so kind of the backstory of this is a bit of the tips are coming from mistakes, let's say, or difficulties that we had in the past 5 years and even before that as an organization that made, I would say, our development slower, more difficult, that, you know, took a lot of time and energy and effort from for that we to solve problems that had arisen. So I broke it down into kind of these 4 different topics, which is, well, first, how do you set up? Then how do you run it once you've set it up? Because setting it up is, in one hand, kind of, you know, people say it's so difficult, of course, to get things started from scratch, but actually the real challenge comes once all of that has fallen into place. And then 2 other topics that I thought were important were security considerations, because this goes without saying, is one of the most important aspects of our work, to make sure that our journalists and our audience are safe. And then some ideas for ways to save money, because if you work in administration, you're always trying to find ways to save money, and some of them I didn't know about, you know, I didn't know about soon enough. So so exactly, one of the biggest things that I think is really important for people to not overlook is getting in contact with experts. Getting in contact with experts in the country that they're working in, as well as local contacts that can be used as good resources, whether that's someone who is an accountant, or someone who simply knows the system of how to set up an organization, another NGO, for example, that can be a guiding kind of mentor in the pitfalls and remembering what, you know, should be written in the statute or what shouldn't. Because there's a lot, and it's kind of overwhelming, especially if you're trying to set up while running. You know, I think we at Maidan, we were not founded in exile because we left Azerbaijan. And so because of that, I think things were maybe a bit simpler. But, you know, a lot of times people who are already working in established newsrooms, then the newsrooms move. And then, you know, you're trying to keep everything running while setting up. And that leads to this kind of level of complexity and urgency, which is leads to, let's say, things being overlooked, and shortcuts, let's say, maybe being taken simply because you need to get things done. But long term, that's going to lead to problems, and especially when it comes to things related to the actual organization's foundation, making sure that everything's in line with whatever legislation there is in the country you're in, especially related, obviously, to taxes, making sure you don't forget any taxes. I think anyone who ever leaves and moves to a new country has that experience. And then if you multiply that by the level of the number of people working at the outlet, that's the number of tax problems and the amount of tax issues you may have. So it's very important to make sure that you kind of dot the I's and cross the T's. And so this is something that I would say, don't kind of try and make shortcuts or save a little bit of money on. It's worth it to invest a little bit more in the right people who know what they're talking about.
I have a quick question that I think, you know, some of the people, our participants, might not understand the importance of this. Could you talk a little bit more to the importance of setting up a legal entity and why that's so important?
Right. So, I mean, mainly because most exile media, I mean, some way, first of all, you need to be able to make money or receive money, and you need to be able to pay people.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with a personal bank account. You need to have an established registered organization, a company, an NGO, something like this. Everyone will decide for themselves, but I think that's also something to look in. It's important to look into is what type of NGO or what type of organization, what type of company you should set up is, because every country has their own difference. What some are limited, some are associations, some are foundations, and every country has its own kind of understanding of what that is, and what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. So depending on what the funding model will be, it's also important to look into, okay, if you're going to be mainly grants based, then NGO types are what you should be looking into. And that's also, again, where there are either other NGOs or other companies or other media outlets in the country you're in that can help, as well as experts, lawyers, etc.
Thanks so much, Matt. I mean, I feel like, again, if you're looking for just like a place to start in the toolkit, go to the Exiled Media 101. It's really like, that's going to kind of lead you to where in the other resources you need to start looking at. And then the idea of some of these resources is to point you in the right direction from there. Cynthia, you went through 2 different resources. Which one do you want to go through first?
My favorite revenue model.
Let's do revenue models.
Revenue model, yes. Thank you.
Okay, let's go through. So you have 5 tips here for building a revenue model.
Yes.
And I think, you also have a little bit of experience working with confidential in this. So if you can just go into it.
Yeah, I just want to explain that when I wrote these pieces, I was part of the team of Confidencial, and my knowledge comes from being a journalist and then leading the initiatives of the membership program and the donation campaigns. And this is something that not only independent media who work in normal situation face, but especially Exiled media when they're trying to diversify income when the traditional resources are gone. This is where you usually go, and this is where a lot of media outlets are experimenting right now. And I wish I had this information when I was doing it, because it was like it was happening as we transition from inside Nicaragua to Costa Rica. And that posed a lot of challenges in terms of how do you get readers to donate, how do you get them to participate in a membership program, and do you collect the money, especially when the media outlet is going from one country to the other and maybe changing the nature of the entity itself. So I tried to be as simple as possible in the sense of how can you use the knowledge that you have as a journalist, and how can you implement it in the strategies. And I think that a lot of people may be overlooking the importance of surveys and the importance of databases, and how these databases can actually be a direct source of information that is more complete than Google Analytics or Facebook Analytics or any other platform that, of course, doesn't give you a complete overview of the information from your readers. So it's better to have a tool that's a database that is linked to your newsletter, for example, where you can ask people whatever you want. And the most engaged readers are going to give you these answers, and they're going to give you like a North Star for your strategy. And this is what we did when I was in Confidencial. We asked readers different questions, but there was a part in which we asked, like, would you be willing to donate? Would you be willing to support financially? And we found that more than 50% of the database was interested in doing that. So in the beginning, we were a little bit, shy about, asking for support. But when we got this green light, we said, it's better to try and fail than to not try at all. So I'm giving tips on how to do that, and also how to repurpose content, because usually when people set up a membership campaign or a membership program or a donation campaign, it is often thought that you have to come up with new products. But it is also a reality that you need a team and you need the time to create these products. But if you can repurpose these products that already exist, if you can repackage them, if you have investigations and you can make them ebooks or podcasts or small explainers or something like this that can be offered to the donors as, as a way of thanking them, like maybe you can do that. And also just to give some encouragement to media outlets and media professionals to say, if you have the impetus of starting, don't quit quickly, because if you quit quickly, then you don't gather enough information to make informed decisions. So an experiment of 3 weeks is not going to give you information. But if you spend more than 6 months, if you spend some time actually analyzing this and trying to get answers from your readers, then it is more likely that you're going to succeed in your strategies.
Perfect. And going towards you wrote another resource, which is, I believe,
Yes.
how to stay relevant to readers in exile.
Yes, it is.
And this is a big one that I think people are also concerned about, which is like, how do I, if I'm sitting, in Germany, or I'm sitting in Costa Rica, or how do I keep the content that I'm writing something that people who are in their home country, your home country, want to read and is relevant to them?
Yeah, this article is actually a product of a lot of conversations that we had in Confidencial between management and editorial, and also conversations that I had with Cindy Regidor, who is the editor of a section that has been created within Confidencial to serve the needs of the diaspora.
And a former ICFJ fellow.
Yes, true. That is true. I as well, by the way.
Oh, too. Perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, you have two people in Confidencial actually creating products that have been innovative and have been responding to the needs of the audiences.
Yeah.
So Cindy noticed when she moved to Costa Rica in 2015 that the Costa Rican media outlets were not covering the Nicaraguan community, which is very big in Costa Rica, as they should, and considering the influence that these people have. So we talked about this article that we created, and we gave tips on how to have a strategy in which you know by experience exactly what the audience is looking for to get in terms of the day-to-day of Nicaragua, for example, or the day-to-day of Russia or any other country. But also, because you're also a migrant, what are the things that you would have liked to read in the media that were responding to your needs? Is it legal advice? Is it I don't know, how to send money to your country? Is it what's happening with the community? Where can I find other people like me that I may not know about? So it's more or less tips to keep your current strategy, content strategy, for the people who are inside the country, but also how to get off this hat of the usual content that you produce, and answer the questions that you are actually looking for yourself, also as a person who's outside of the country. So from building virtual communities to making alliances with media from the country that is welcoming you, to applying some social media strategies to find the stories, to get the word going so that people know that they can actually reach out to you to get their stories published. So these are tips that actually Cindy has applied herself with her team within Confidencial to actually make this project successful. And it's one of the sections that have brought a lot of traffic to the website because of this new audience that may have not known about Confidencial before, but now is interested in getting this information that is vital for their lives and their decision-making process as well.
I would like to ask you to go a little bit more into this subject right here about joining forces with other media outlets from your country, region, or globally. This is kind of the heart of what Nemo is, which is kind of like that alliance building, that knowledge sharing. And I guess I wanted to let's speak to the importance of this. Why is it important to continue create those networks and create that knowledge sharing?
Yeah, I mean, two ways. The first one is the alliances that Confidencial has built with local newspapers or media outlets in Costa Rica that have allowed us to actually broadcast our TV show from Costa Rica, when we didn't have the equipment or the office or the resources to do it. And also to, if one media outlet is good at something, the other media outlet is good at TV, for example. The other one is good at web content, and so you join forces to actually make a stronger investigation and publish it, both in Nicaragua and in Costa Rica. And with NEMO, especially, it's the knowledge exchange and advocacy efforts, because it is not the same when one media outlet is trying to make a case for Exile Media than when a network of media outlets from different parts of the world that have, it is true that these media outlets have very specific situations when they operate, but they also face the same challenges, and they come together and talk in spaces where people are interested in helping Exile Media to make the case for support for Exile Media organizations.
Perfect. I have a few more questions for Cynthia and Matt that's outside the toolkit and more about their experiences. First off, I'm going to show you, everyone watching this, how to get to this. So if you come on to IJNet, you're going to come up to toolkits right here. We have stories, opportunities, toolkits. I know a lot of you guys are coming for opportunities, and we want you to move also to the toolkits when you have the chance. Click on the toolkit section. Right now, our top one is religious reporting, but if you scroll down just one, you find our Exile Media toolkit. And here you go. So that's just the way to get to it if you're looking to get to it. And we also will include a link into the direct link to this and the notes in the follow-up to this. I would like to ask a couple more questions to you two, just more in general about Exile Media itself and your experiences in it. I'm going to start with a really broad one, which is, for you guys, what do you see as the state of Exile Media today? Why is it important? And has, Exile Media, is this a new thing? Is this something that has always been there and is it suddenly accelerating in the number of people doing it? What's the state of it today for people who don't know?
Please.
So I guess this is my topic to start. Yeah, so the state to today. Well, first of all, it's not new. We think that there often this kind of topics come up as trends and then are forgotten every few years. There is a trend because we have seen multiple countries in recent years have an exodus of journalists, media workers, for a multitude of reasons. The most I think, most recent and glaring ones being cases like Nicaragua, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Belarus, Russia. And then you see really the differences in the reasons behind that. But, even before that, a decade earlier, there were many leaving Syria. And this is kind of going on for a long time. One thing that we've learned through getting to know each other is also, our partner DVB has been around for 30 years. And they were founded in exile and then moved back into Myanmar and then left again. So you also see that there's a lot of kind of diverse paths and experiences that different media outlets have. And in the past, Exile Media has existed forever, really. Even 100 years ago, it was there were lots of dissidents based in Tbilisi at some point, just as there have been now. So the difference really has been, I would say, with the digital age, which has changed about Exiled Media even more, is that we're no longer solely reliant on, for example, radio or television to broadcast, which obviously creates a lot of difficulties because you need to be relatively in proximity to countries to do such things. But it also means that we're able to have, through the digital age, really large followings of readers inside the countries that the Exile Media are working in, but also that people can, pretty much work almost fully as journalists, let's say, with few restrictions other than not being directly personally in the field, even from abroad, getting real-time information sent to them from people, from citizens, from readers, as well as from other journalists that are still based in the country. So I think in this sense, there's a lot of potential for exiled media. And it's also a very, diverse group, from those who have lots of people in the country still working underground to those who have very few, to those focusing on the diaspora, to those focusing on the people inside the country. This state today, of course, is worrying, because we seem to see the trend that there are more and more countries that are having media move into exile. But at the same time, I think, what exiled media outlets and journalists who are working from exile or for hybrid outlets are doing are really, they're at the forefront for the fight for freedom of speech, because they're, what organizations like ours are doing, are kind of protecting the kind of core basics of the right to information for those populations. And so the work that they're doing is extremely important, because we're talking about situations in which really restrictions are so high, and yet we see in all of these countries that the populations, the readers, are thirsty for information. They want real fact-based, verified information, and that has not died, even though there have been so many restrictions put on the media.
Yeah, but also acknowledging that the moment that exile media in this very hostile environment cease to exist, that is the moment where people are really vulnerable, because they don't get reliable information that doesn't come from the regime, doesn't come from the government. Like, who do you really trust, So I think this is a moment in time where independent media is really valued by the audiences, and we saw that in Nicaragua, how there was a moment in which independent media was a little bit overlooked or seen as the troublemakers. And when the political crisis started, it was like, oh, these are the people who are actually putting the information that we need to make better decisions for the future, whether that is now or in a couple of years when the regimes ends, hopefully. Then we get to know what is like for us to build a new country. So I think that is something that has changed over the years, and we hope that this trust that we're building now is gonna pay off for a lot of years to come.
Well, I think that's a great segue into like our second question, which is, when you're sitting in exile, when you're, abroad from the country that you're reporting on, how do you see impact? How do you see, the impact of your work? Because it can take, let's talk about the example of Russia. We've had Putin in power for at least 20 years, and we don't know when that could end. How do you see any kind of impact in a situation where authoritarian structures are so strong like that?
It's very tricky. It's very tricky to answer. I think I can pitch in with a few ideas. I think it depends on what your newsroom defines as impact, because and it depends on the situation of your country. In a country where your website or your platforms are not banned, then you can look at traffic. For example, it can be a way of measuring impact. If your traffic is growing, if the investigations that you're actually looking forward to for people to read are growing, if the time that they're spending or sharing these stories is growing, then you can measure success. But in societies where people cannot access the websites or these platforms normally, you have other ways of measuring it. If you establish alliances with other media outlets or organizations within the countries, you can establish, for example, I'm thinking at the top of my head, a system to track if these stories have been printed in some sort of magazine and have been shared in communities. You can track if these stories have been shared on WhatsApp, for example, if there is some sort of network that has been built to bypass the tools or the strategies that the governments are implementing to block this information. It could also be that some that the leader of the regime is actually responding to an investigation, or someone from the government has quit and left the regime. I mean, it really depends on what you're looking at. It really depends on the topic that you're covering. But those are some of the ways that you can see if you're being successful with the coverage. But maybe Matt has other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the main way to see that. And I think, impact, it's rare that actually, it's not rare that it's immediate, but it's less likely that it will be immediate. Just in the same way, I feel that, actually that goes for media in a lot of, countries where press freedom is much in a much better place. The goal, of course, of journalism is to see that the stories that are produced have some impact really on the world around them. And while on one hand you can see that in, as you said, examples of actual changes happening based off of reporting, that does happen, even if it's not on a systemic scale. So we see, for example, at Maidan TV, a lot of social issues that we cover, stories of poverty or bribery, etc. Some of these exact specific problems are solved afterwards because of our coverage, either because private citizens want to support these people in this situation, or the authorities decide to kind of try and fix it so that they don't look so bad. But there is also that, so you have this anecdotal impact, but I think that, it's going to also be much more long-term. And in order, it's, media is something that kind of needs to exist in a kind of constant stream, because it's the kind of the accumulation of all of that together that will lead to different changes happening. And so it's maybe, of course, sometimes it can be one video or one article, but often it's the accumulation of that, over time, and the information being consumed, and then that leads to certain decisions being made, etc., and hopefully to the opening up of the societies, or reopening up of the societies.
Perfect. I have two more questions for you guys, but before I get into it, I want to encourage everyone who's participating right now, who's watching, please put your questions into the Q&A, any questions you have for Matt and Cynthia. We'll be having a short session in about 5-10 minutes while I'll be asking those questions. So please put them in right now so that we can look through them and we can ask them. Going off of what you said, Matt, this is more of a personal question for both of you, but the entire idea is this is not an easy job that you guys are doing, Exiled Media. What is your personal reason for doing this? Why are you in it right now? I think hearing your stories would be really great for our listeners.
For doing Nemo?
For doing Nemo, yes.
Yeah. Look, I have been doing journalism or working in media for more than a decade. And I've seen in Nicaragua the results that reliable information can have in decision making. In a country where Nicaragua, second poorest country of Latin America, where not a lot of people have higher education, the fact that Nicaraguans can access stories about the government, stories about the social situation of the country, or what's happening with the communities that are outside the country, the fact that they know this information, it's going to pay off in the short term or the long term. So if I personally can benefit with something small to make these media outlets more empowered, that they have the resources to actually continue to operate, that they have the knowledge to get to the solution faster than the media outlets who, for example, were alone in this process, then I think that is more than enough to contribute to the rebuilding of Nicaragua and the democracy of other countries that are participating in Nemo, and media outlets that are not part of Nemo, but they want to contribute and that are looking to get the information going. So I think it's more about, being useful for the community, useful for media outlets, journalists, but ultimately citizens.
Matt, what about you?
What's
what she said?
that
was really well said, Cynthia.
I mean, I have a different, I guess, I came to this field slightly differently. So I don't come from a country that is like, I'm not from Azerbaijan, or a country that has exiled media, but I guess I just have an inherent personal belief in freedom of expression and freedom of speech, and somehow this is where the path has taken me. But I think that while my main focus is in Azerbaijan and Maidan TV, there's the reason that we wanted to start Nemo and continue and put together a toolkit and do all these different things is because it's the bigger picture, and it's also about if just talking about it or sharing a little bit of information, it might be repetitive, it might even just be small tips even, but if that's going to help somebody out, that you get a discount on PayPal, I mean, it sounds small, but this is something that can actually be useful. And if you add all of those things up, it's going to lead to people not having to go through maybe some of the difficulties that I had to go through in my position, and not have to it's good to go through things to learn how to work better, let's say, but not everything. Yeah. So so things can be difficult, but not everything has to be difficult. And the goal really is that worldwide, also one of the main reasons that Nemo came together was the idea that we see regimes copying each other. They copy laws, they copy the same types of repression, they copy the same censorship tactics. So we shouldn't be creating our own individual solutions to all of these when the solutions probably already exist somewhere else. We should be sharing them, and we should be, and that will, kind of lessen the effect that these regimes are having on the censorship of information.
I have a few questions here from our audience, so I'm actually going to go through a few of them. I'm going to ask one from Olawale. He goes, "Good day, everyone. My name is Sen. I apologize for the pronunciation, Sanusi Olawale. He's based in Nigeria. He goes, special appreciation goes to Ajahn and Nemo for coming together on this. My question is, how can exiled journalists ensure the safety of their sources and colleagues back in their home country? So we do have a resource on this, but I think this is a good thing to go into. As an exiled journalist, you surely need information from back home. So how do you go about guaranteeing the safety of journalists who are reporting for you back home? I think this is a big one, so I think it would be a good one to go into.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
So I have bad news. Thank you. It's a good question. The answer is actually it's impossible to ensure safety. I think it took me a long time to accept this. It doesn't mean that you can't do everything possible to provide your team and your audience and your sources with as much information and the tools they need to keep themselves as safe as possible. So I do think it's important to accept. Also, I think it's healthy to accept that there is a certain level to which you can provide safety. And I guess then I don't have like a shortcut answer to this, unfortunately, but it depends on the situation. What are the restrictions in country? But it can range from, having contingency plans to having physical security protocols to having digital security protocols. I think what's important is to make sure you inform people about risks that they're taking. That people can, you don't want to take their agency away from them either if they make the decision to they know that they're taking a risk, but there's it's, I think, and those outside to be as aware as possible and learn as much as possible about what are these types of security risks, especially on the digital side, which we can see even from outside. And okay, what is that? Using VPNs or using two-factor authentication, using certain apps rather than other apps, making sure that everything uses been vetted by security organizations, etc. This gives your team the tools. It gives the sources the tools, using encrypted communication lines, etc. To keep themselves as safe as possible, because it's one thing to take a risk and be aware of what can happen, but there's a difference between unnecessary mistakes along the line. So you do as much as you can as possible. I think this is but I think it really depends on each country's situation, because there are different types of censorship and security problems, and they kind of take different forms. So I don't know if it's the best answer. But
I think also, as I was listening to you answering these questions, I also feel like it's important to highlight that communication is the most important step. Like, to talk to your team and say, okay, what is your situation right now? And also just to double check, because it's not not everybody will stay in the team, and that's also okay that they say, you guys, this is not for me. I'm just not going to continue in this organization because safety reasons, family safety reasons, because it's not only you, it's also your relatives and loved ones. So to talk about the situation and discuss multiple scenarios. If this happened, what would be the, a solution? If this other scenario happens, what would be the solution? And to come to an agreement on what is it that the person is willing to do, if this person agrees to stay in the country, and also to rely on organizations that provide this support, and also not being afraid of reaching out to organizations that are members of NEMO, for example, that can gladly talk to you about their experience, and also how these experiences may be, a source for tips to actually develop your own security protocol or your own physical um, protocols that you can implement. You cannot prevent certain situations from happening because, as Matt says, every context is different, and you never know what authoritarian governments are going to do. But the more you know, the better equipped you are to make fast decisions and decisions that actually protect the team.
We have another question here that's specifically about more back to financial sustainability, which I know is a major, major topic in Exile Media. We have an attendee here who says, I'm an Afghan journalist in exile in Paris. Thank you for this amazing opportunity. I've heard a lot of information. I am managing an Exile Media organization, and funding is a significant challenge. What are your tips for applying for both large and small grants?
This is my turn. Tips. I think, I mean, the big tip is, I think first it's important to, on the internal side, it's make sure that you're only applying for things that you actually feel comfortable applying for. So don't let the calls dictate what your goals are internally, but the other way around, because you want to make sure that you have you're not, that the administration is not pressuring at the editorial side to cover certain topics. That all needs to kind of come from the editorial guidelines and the editorial goals. So this is I think the first thing to keep in mind. It's never worth compromising just to apply for an application for a call. It's important. Unfortunately, it is important to network. Because sometimes you only find out about things as you get to know more different people in the sphere. But I think one thing is important is to, if you can, reach out to the organization before you apply. So a lot of times, or not all, but especially for smaller grants, let's say, most likely they will have a contact point that you can ask questions. And that will also give you a better idea of how to formulate things before you apply. So that might just give you more information. Doesn't mean, knowing them is going to get you the yes, but it does mean that you can kind of better understand what they're looking for and then apply accordingly. But yeah, networking is quite important because you often also find out about calls. If you can pitch your ideas to different organizations that support in advance of calls, they will know who you are, and when a call comes out, they will also there's a chance that they will proactively reach out to you and say, hey, this call has come out, feel free to apply. I also think it's just about being, and then I think it's also about building, with one or two donors, if you can build a good level of cooperation, that you're professional, you're getting everything done well, your financial reports are looking good, etc. That's also going to allow you to, they also talk, and so it will allow you to kind of build a certain reputation that will allow you to apply to other organizations as well. So I think this I hope that this is useful.
Yeah.
But I would also say, you don't want to be solely reliant on grants. If you can be, please, it's good to think of business plans and business models as well. Because there's always opportunities to make money. I would also say, if you can, split the editorial and administrative work. So have someone who really has some experience in applying for grants, or if you have possibility of someone who's even an expert to assist you, especially in the beginning, to get into the kind of motions of how to apply, what this language is, the outcomes and inputs, outputs, whatever. rather than trying to, loading it onto someone who's also working on the editorial side, because that makes things very difficult, I think, and everything kind of suffers.
I would also say that the networking is also very important, because for Exiled Media, challenges that some of the grants are directed to specific, like the country of origin, but you're based elsewhere as an organization. And this is a common situation that we've talked about with other media outlets. And some media outlets have like this close connection to the donor to explain, we need some flexibility to be able to access these grants, or this grant is, maybe the requirements are too rigid because our context is different. So to be able to actually get this flexibility, you need to do the networking so that they trust you and you trust them and you have this space. And another topic and final topic that I would say is also when you're in exile, it is, we have lived it. It's everything is urgent. And when you see the grants, you want to apply to all of the grants possible, because you need to actually get your operation going. But also try to take a moment to analyze if that you have the operational capacity to actually handle the grant, if it is worth it to handle the grant. Because sometimes it could be that the administrative work is going to be more daunting than actually executing the project. So you have to sit down and think with your team, like, do you actually want to do it? Is it good for us? Is it going to benefit us? Does it align to our values? Does it align to our goals? I think that's important, because then if you apply with, blind eyes, then it's going to be like very complicated in the end to do this administrative work that you could have avoided if you had analyzed pros and cons.
Thank you so much for that information, guys. I hope that's really useful to the participants here. I have one last question, and it actually feeds into a question that I was going to ask, and we're going to kind of ask them together. This is from Sal Jello. I'm a journalist living in exile here in Canada. It's tremendously complicated starting all over in a new environment. What opportunities are available for someone like me? And the question I was going to ask, which was very similar to this, is if you are someone who is just in exile, maybe like you're a couple months into being relocated to Canada or Costa Rica or Germany, what would your advice be for the first things to start to think about? What was your one thing that you think someone in exile should consider, especially if they want to create an exile media outlet?
I would say, but again, I was not part of like that area of the team that actually did this, but I would say one of the most urgent things to think about is, if you want to create an outlet, what is the legal entity that you want to choose? Because that's going to dictate a lot of things for the future, and changing the nature of that entity is going to be very complicated on the way. So I would say get as much information as you can to make the right decision, considering what are the business opportunities or the funding opportunities that you can get in this new country. I would say that's the start.
Yeah. And then specifically, because I think you covered the kind of founding side of things, specifically about opportunities for someone who's starting over. What is also still what we were talking just about grants to fund media, but there are also lots of support organizations for what we'd call emergency funding or relocation, etc. And often they have different mandates, and they can help for a longer or shorter period of time, certain types of things or other types of things. But there are organizations like Committee to Protect Journalists, Reporters Without Borders, Free Press Unlimited, JX Fund. I'm not sure if look into it. I can't remember right now if they help individual journalists. I believe that they do have some type of emergency funding though. If you're Human Rights Watch as well, Freedom House, there are multiple different organizations. If you go to them, and I would also say the ACOS Alliance has a lot of resources on their, and I have a link to it, actually, the ACOS Alliance in my article, the 101 article, that also has, they have kind of like a overview of multiple different organizations depending on what your needs are. So they may have they have an overview of emergency assistance that you can go and check there. there are opportunities there for short-term things, and also organizations like RSF will offer, for example, trainings. They will offer some types of like internship types of style thing that with stipends, etc., to kind of get things back up and get things going. So there are a lot of resources out there, both for individual journalists as well as media outlets.
Perfect. Well, I think, we're kind of wrapping up here, and I want to thank Matt and Cynthia for all their expertise, all their advice for our participants. Is there anything we didn't touch on today, or anything that you think that you really want to like drive home to our participants today before we wrap up?
I would say, I know it's hard to establish either as an individual or as a media outlet organization, but if it's possible for you, don't quit, don't give up, because this is a topic that we have been discussing in conferences and between ourselves, that the worst thing that can happen to the audiences inside and outside the country is not having the information and the quality information that you as a journalist, or you guys as a team of media outlets can bring. I know it's very difficult. I've lived it myself, and the team of Azerbaijan and the other teams from Nemo have as well. But it is important to take into consideration that we're a very persistent sector, and people are relying on us to make the decisions that are going to shape the country and our society. So please don't give up.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. I would like to thank Cynthia, Matt, and everyone at Nemo for just their amazing work on creating this toolkit for us. Their expertise we're really hoping it can get into the hands of journalists. Like all of you guys listening, that's the point of this, is to get it into your guys' hands so that you can do something good with it. We also want to just thank you two for sitting here, talking through, answering people's questions. We're getting a lot of hearts and claps on the emoji board right now. So hugely appreciated, everyone. Everyone, again, if you're an Exiled journalist, if you're thinking about Exiled journalism, if you're looking to support Exiled journalists, go onto our toolkit. There's also ways to further contact Nemo through there, that in case you have any further questions.
Yes.
We also, I saw that we have at least one Afghan journalist who's joining us. This is going to be translated into Persian soon, so keep an eye out for that. And we're hoping to have it translated into other languages. So we're gonna end here. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Best of luck with your really important and amazing work.
Thank you for having us, and
Thank
thank
you.
you everybody for joining.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.